Okay, welcome everyone to the official lecture one for the web design decal. Today's lecture is going to be on the structure of websites. So I'm glad to see a lot of you here today. Again, I just want to ask that everyone, if possible, I know some of you might be in libraries or somewhere else, but to turn your cameras on and participate in live lecture, you can just feel free to unmute whenever you have a question. It just makes it a lot more enjoyable for us teaching you. So getting started, some quick announcements. So office hours started this week. We have a Piazza post where you can see all the staff's office hours. We have quite a bit of office hours. We have 10 staff members. Each staff member is going to have 2 hours of office hours a week. So there's quite a bit of help that you can get. I would encourage you to start your assignments early so you can make use of these office hours, make use of us to try to get through any blockers that you have. And if you haven't already, create your account on the WDD portal by tonight at the latest. Hopefully you already have it done, but if not, that's perfectly all right. Just make sure you get it done as soon as possible. Also join this class on Piazza. That's where we're going to be making most of our announcements for this class, and also where you'll be asking most of the questions that you have that are course related. And again, enroll in CS 198 unless you're an auditor, you want to get your units and make sure you get that in before the deadline. Something that's not on here that Julia put in the chat earlier is feel free to contribute to our Spotify playlist. Whenever we have breaks or just during Berkeley time, this is what we'll be playing. So if you have any music that you want to share with everyone, we welcome you to do so. So moving on, homework 1 is going to be announced on Piazza as soon as this lecture is over. This will be due next Tuesday at 7 p.m. So that's right before lecture starts. If you have questions, again, feel free to unmute or just drop them in the Zoom chat. If you don't feel comfortable, feel free to direct message me as well, and I'll just read that out anonymously. Let's see. Download a text editor. We prefer Visual Studio Code, and also use Google Chrome. It's just easiest for general web development. And if you're DSP and you're having trouble with any of this or anything else, just let us know and then we'll accommodate. Okay, so getting started. In this class, we'll use a couple of different creative tools. So we'll use a web browser that could be like Chrome or Safari, Firefox, Opera, Edge. Again, for this class specifically, we'll be using Chrome. We'll also be using a text editor. We prefer Visual Studio Code, and a prototyping tool. We prefer to use Figma. So these are the 5 topics that we'll cover in today's lecture for the programming section, and then Lily will do the design section. So we have the structure of websites, the structure of a single web page, the structure of content in a web page, basic HTML tags, and then file paths. So starting with the first topic, structure of websites. So what is a website? A website is traditionally a set of web pages served on a single domain. So you can think about like wdd.io or like berkeley.edu, that's an entire website. And then within this website, there are web pages. Each web page is a document, usually written in HTML. That could be like a certain academic page on berkeley.edu or like the homepage on wdd.io. And a domain is an address, for example, wdd.io, that represents a server where all of these files are located. And I'll expand a little bit on that in just a second. So we have this analogy here where we have a picture of a map and then we have this Berkeley fire station number 5. And then this fire station has a little pin, but we'll just refer to this as just fire station. It also has an address right here. So similarly for our website, we refer to our website as just wdd.io because that's how you can access it. That's just what we call it. And then this website also has an address, 207.38.86.245. So this is where this website lives on the internet. And once you go to that address where this website lives, then you'll fetch a specific file. This is a specific file for our WDD website. You can see web design decal right here, wdd.io, and then all of these other things that we'll get to later on in this lecture and later on in the class. And then after we grab this file of HTML, we'll render that code on a canvas, which will be our web browser, and then we'll get this nice little website that we have right over here. So roughly speaking, there will be 2 ends of a website. Front end, which is what we mostly deal with in this class, is what the users can see and what happens in your web browser. So that contains all of the text that you see on the website, all of the images, all of the buttons. And then on the other side, we have the backend. So that's what users can't see beyond just the web browser. For example, databases where we store all of your information for your logins and all that for the portal. I'll just stop really quickly right now. Do we have any questions so far? Okay, great. So what are websites made of? You might have seen this on our website as you were signing up or like applying to this class, but there's three components, at least what we'll be covering. So there's HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So HTML is the structure of our website. CSS is what kind of controls the design of our website. And then JavaScript creates a lot of the functions of different websites. So again, HTML provides the structure of the page. HTML files define the content on the page, like texts, links, images. And as we'll see very soon, HTML doesn't really give a lot of like nice, pretty designs to our website. This purely provides what's on the website, just the text by itself, very plain. Just the links, very plain, very ugly. You might click it and then it might turn blue like a lot of the older websites. And just the plain images that you see on websites. Oops. Okay, moving on, CSS provides the design of the page. So moving on from HTML, that would create a really ugly website, something really plain, no like font, no specific fonts, no specific colors, no specific layouts, just items, texts, and images laid one on top of another. So one step further, CSS provides the design of the page. So CSS files, which we'll learn as well, define rules for the appearance of content. For example, you might have a header that you want to have a certain font or a certain color. CSS will determine that. Maybe based on just HTML, you have two items that are stacked on top of each other. If you want to move them next to each other, CSS also controls that. And CSS stands for cascading style sheets. This is an example from our wdd.io website. So you see there's these little blocks of code. We have this description right here. There is body, there is a .image scaled wh, .clear. And then inside each of these little chunks, each of these curly braces, there's more specific descriptions of what we want certain aspects of these elements to be. So for body, we want the margin to be 0. We want the font family to be whatever. We want the background to be whatever. And then we can set all of these in our CSS code. And lastly, JavaScript provides the function of the page. So we don't always want our websites to just be nice and pretty and have a lot of images. Most websites that we use nowadays have different functions. For example, our portal has a lot of functionality. You click something and then you'll download something. You click a certain page, you'll move to a different page. And then maybe like you type something in to log in and then it brings you to another page, right? That's all controlled using JavaScript. It provides the function of the page. Examples are drop-down menus or tabs, anything where we have to interact with the web page and then the website does something as a response. So here's a JavaScript example from wd.io. If you're already familiar with programming, and it's perfectly fine if you're not, this class is designed for people who might not be. You'll recognize these functions, and you'll also see that there's some dollar signs here, but this is syntax that's used in jQuery, a JavaScript library that we won't really be touching in this class, but the JavaScript that we'll be using looks very familiar as well. Okay, here's an example website folder. So just these documents or these files right here can create an entire website. So we have these files that end in .html. We have files that end in .css, .js, .png. This one might look the most familiar to you. Brooklyn1, Brooklyn2, Brooklyn3.png. These are images that we see on our website, and we need these images to be part of our project in some way so that we can access them and display them on the web page that we want to make. These are HTML files. Each of them represent one specific web page. This is one single CSS file that determines the styling of all of our web pages. And then this .js file, or these two .js files, contain JavaScript, which again will control some of the functionality on our web page. Okay, so moving on to the structure of a single web page. We just talked about the structure of websites, all the different aspects of a website. Now we'll zoom in a little bit closer on what exactly makes up one single web page. So the answer is mostly HTML. So what is an HTML file? as we saw earlier, the HTML file, let me skip back a little bit. It was kind of a lot. There's a lot of text here, a lot of these things called divs, which we'll cover. But something really unique here is that you see there's this div right here, and then it sort of like closes off right here with this slash. And then this is like one chunk of our page. Here we have another div that closes off a little bit. This is another chunk of our page. And then inside this chunk, there's like nested items. There's another div in here, another div in here. There's another nested thing in here, which on its own has nested elements. So what I'm trying to say is that HTML files very much have this nested parent-child relationship. So moving a couple steps back, an HTML file is just a plain text file with a file extension .html, and index.html is one type of HTML document or HTML file that's usually going to be the starting point or the homepage of a website. And these HTML files, again, they're just plain text files, so we can edit these with text editors that I mentioned earlier, for example, VS Code or Sublime or Atom, etc. And what's really unique about these HTML files is that you can simply open up this file inside your web browser, just like you can open up like a PDF inside your web browser and it'll show up inside Chrome, for example. You can open up an HTML file and then it'll just turn that into a web page, just like all the web pages you see on the internet. And I mentioned this earlier, and here's a picture of these cute little dogs that are like Russian nesting dolls, one inside of another, and HTML files have that similar relationship. Sorry, I think I might be double clicking. Okay, no. So now we'll go over some of the tags, or like what is a tag in an HTML document. So as we saw earlier, we saw a lot of these div tags that had these little like caret brackets next to them. So here we see a tag called strong, which I'll explain very soon. But we have this opening tag, and then we have this closing tag that always has this slash next to the opening caret. So tags are the building blocks of HTML, and they usually, almost always, come in pairs. So we'll look a little bit at the anatomy of an HTML document. So here we have a very simplified HTML document. It's not going to have a lot on your page. And if you were to type this into like an actual index.html document, for example, and open that up on your browser, it's going to look something like this. So in these slides, on the left, we'll have the code, and on the right, we'll have what this would look like in your browser if you were just opening it up. So we'll go down the list of what each of these tags actually do. At the very top, we have caret, exclamation point, doc type, HTML. We want to include this on every single HTML document. And what this does is it tells the browser that this file contains HTML. So when we open this file up on Chrome, it's not going to treat it like a PDF, for example. It's going to know this is an HTML document. So I need to render what's inside this HTML document and create a web page out of that. Next, we have these HTML tags. Again, you see this kind of pair relationship where there's an opening tag and there's a closing tag with this bracket right here. Everything in our web page goes inside these HTML tags. If you don't put inside the HTML tags, like if you took one of these and you kind of shoved it outside, you might get issues, you might not. Usually browsers like Chrome are pretty good at fixing these mistakes for us, but this is just good convention and it helps you to read your code to understand what's going on in your code as well. So in general, just try to follow all of these rules. Next, we have our head tags. So head is unique because it contains information for the browser, but everything inside our head tag, for example, this title right here, isn't going to show up on our page. If we go back a little bit, you'll see that right here, this welcome page doesn't show up on our actual like browser that we have on this computer right here. Instead, all that's contained in head is information for the browser specifically. For example, what welcome page is right here. This tag specifies the text that shows up on the tab of a web browser at the top of the window. For example, if you open up like Facebook, it'll say like Facebook, like homepage or something, or like J profile. Or if you open up a new tab, on top of the tab, you'll see the little words that say new tab. So that's what's going on inside here. This doesn't show up on your actual web page, but it tells the browser some information, and the browser may convey that information as well to the users. For example, welcome page is going to show up on the top of your browser in that little tab. Next is the body tag, and the body tag is where everything really is where you put everything that actually shows up on your page. Here you see welcome to WDD exclamation point. And here on our computer, on our browser, we see welcome to WDD exclamation point. And here we have WDD PNG. And here we have a picture of our WDD logo.
Sorry, I had a
So
quick
the third
question.
section, yes.
So when the title of the image was wdd.png, is that how it's saved locally on your computer?
Yes, that's just, we'll talk more about this when we get to file paths in like the last section of this lecture, but wdd.png is just the name that this image is saved as, and it'll be somewhere inside your project. And then we use this image tag to say that we want to grab an image from this location, which is just going to be wdd.png inside our project, and then that will show up on our browser. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, moving on. So third section is the structure of content in the web page. So here we see that, just as I pointed out earlier, we have this p tag that says welcome to WDD, and then this shows up right here. We have this image, and then this shows up right here. I guess that was just the last part I was supposed to talk about before I got here, but I guess I'll stop again for questions. Does anyone have any other questions about this anatomy of an HTML document, what's inside this document right here, and how that corresponds to what we see on the screen? Okay, I did skip a slide. This is pretty important. So we see that there's a kind of different tag right here. It doesn't look like all of the other tags we've seen before, and this is also kind of faded out. So this is going to be a comment. If we have this tag that's a caret, exclamation point, and then a dash dash, and then some text inside, and then it ends with a dash dash, and then caret in the other direction, this is going to be a comment. These are completely ignored by the browser. They're not going to show up here, and the user isn't going to know that this is here unless they're like digging through your HTML code. So even though the users don't see this at all, this doesn't really create any impact on your page. This is very useful for yourself to organize and to know what's going on inside your code. And also for other developers, or for example, the TAs, if we're trying to help you understand something or try to like understand your code, it helps other people to know what sections are supposed to be what. For example, you can have a comment here that says, this is going to be the home page, and it's going to contain information about yada, yada, yada. Okay, so we talked about some HTML tags earlier in this little anatomy of an HTML document section, but here we'll talk more about what a lot of different HTML tags are, when you might use them, what they look like. And then when you're doing your assignments, you can definitely refer back to these couple of slides to see what tags you should be using, especially on this first homework assignment that's going to be released tonight. So the basic forms of content in a document include like paragraph text that can be bolded or italicized, also headings or links or lists or images. So the most basic type of tag that we might use, just in general, is going to be just plain text. So this p tag stands for paragraph. We see we have an opening tag and a closing tag. Inside we have some text. So this tells our browser that we have this text that we want to include on our web page, and this is just going to be in plain text, just like it's a paragraph of our whatever article or something else. And here we have another p tag. And what's unique about p tags is, or I guess not quite unique, but a function of p tags is that it puts text on different lines using these tags. So if we have this opening p tag, closing p tag with some text in between, this opening p tag, closing p tag with text in between, these are always going to be on different lines unless we use like CSS to specify otherwise. Next, we have bolded and italicized text. So if we want to bold our text, we can use these strong tags that we saw a couple slides earlier. If we surround this text by a strong opening tag and a strong closing tag, everything in between is going to be bolded. Similarly, if we use EM, everything in between is going to be italicized. You might wonder, what does EM mean? Why is it called EM and not like ITA? EM just stands for emphasized, but I think nowadays everyone just says like italicized text. So whatever helps you to remember this, just know that this is either going to be emphasized, if that's how you like to think about it, or it's going to be italicized. Okay, nesting tags. So this is a little bit interesting. Here we see that we have a sort of interesting combination of tags here. We saw these strong tags, we saw these M tags, but now they're being used together. So let's go step by step and try to break down what's really going on here. And this is the overall output that we get. We just want to know why. So remember, everything inside these strong tags, this opening and closing tag, is going to be bolded. So inside here, we have the word different, and we also have the word text. So both of these are going to be bolded. And here that lines up with what we see. There's just a little bit more to it. So inside this strong tag, there's a nested tag of an opening M tag and a closing M tag. So this word different is already bolded, but this nested tag is going to add additional like functionality, additional styling to change this different into just bolded, from bolded text into bolded and italicized text. And we see here, this opening and closing M tag is around different, but it's not around text. So text is bolded because it's between these two strong tags, but it's not italicized because the only thing being italicized is this word different. Any questions about this?
Yes, can I just ask something? Is there a limit on how many tags you can put on one line or comment?
Like how many different tags you can put on one line?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so actually, let's see. I guess like if you can come up with a lot of different tags that might like work together, some tags like they might like override, I think. Not all tags work like this where they'll combine. For example, if you put like an H1 and H2, I'm not really sure how that will behave. But as long as they're like compatible and they can overlap, like strong and M, or if there's something like, I don't know, some other tag that's similar to these two, right? That styles the text in a certain way, then you could just like stack those on top of each other. As long as it makes sense, there's no limit to like how many you can put on a specific line.
Okay. And for this one, for example, would you have to also put P at the beginning or no? So to indicate that it's a paragraph.
Yeah, you could take all like this entire line and you can put it inside a P tag and then it would treat that as a paragraph, but the text inside it would be bolded and then this word would be italicized. So you could put like a P here and a P here, like an opening P tag and a closing P tag there, and that would still work.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? Cool. So moving on to headings, we have heading tags that include H1, H2, H3, H4, H5, and H6. So as this number increases, the text just gets progressively smaller. We see here, this is corresponding to H1, this is corresponding to H2, all the way down, and then this is the smallest one that corresponds to H6, but all of these I think are still going to be bigger than just like a normal paragraph text. You can play around with these when you're like writing your code or when you're designing your website, just to see which one kind of fits for what you're doing. But it's nice that there's like this default set of 6 that you choose from. So moving on to another tag that looks a little bit different than the other ones that we've already seen. So this is an A tag. We see here, this opening tag extends all the way to over here, right? This opening caret, closing caret. And then this closing tag just looks the same as usual. What's different about links is that there's this extra href attribute. So inside href, it tells you if you want to go to a certain link, what is that link that you want to go to? And you just put the address or the link to that, whatever other website inside here. That could be any link on the internet. That could also be another page in your website. It really depends on like what you want to put in there and what file path or what absolute path link that you choose. And then inside here, in between this opening and closing tag, we have the text here. So click here on your website. Click here is what you would have to click to bring you to the link that this href is referring to. Sorry, I think I'm skipping a couple of slides when I click. Okay, moving on to lists. So it seems like there's a lot to learn, and there is, but you can always refer back to these. And I think as you use a lot of these HTML tags more and more, you'll get more used to them, and then you'll kind of remember like what to use at what time, and then you'll remember like what each tag is called. And I think it'll just get easier with practice. So lists, here we have UL. This tag denotes an unordered list. So unordered list, you see there's bullet points. It's not like 1, 2, 3. And then inside this unordered list, nested inside, we have these list items which use the LI tag. We have apples and oranges and bananas. And we could just as easily replace this UL with another tag called OL, which we don't have on this slide. But OL is just an ordered list. So to replace these bullets with numbers. So this will be 1 apples, 2 oranges, and 3 bananas. Question. What do indentations do in HTML? Really good question. So for your HTML code to work and for everything to show up correctly on your browser, you don't actually need indentations. However, indentations help you to organize everything. For example, right here, if we didn't have these indentations, it would be a little bit harder to tell what items are nested inside this unordered list tag. What are the list items? What is like the actual list itself? But indentations help us to know what is nested inside something else, what's a child of something else, and determine those relationships a lot more easily. Okay, so at the very beginning of lecture, I mentioned that most tags come in pairs. There's an opening tag and a closing tag, but the exception to this are image tags. So they only have one tag, it's not in a pair, and there's a slash at the very end right here. And just like earlier with links where we had href, now we have this src thing, which inside it will tell the browser where they should go find the image. For example, you want an image to show up. As someone asked earlier, with like the WDD example on that little computer that we had earlier, what's inside the source tells the browser if we have like apple.jpg, is it just in the same folder, the same directory that we're in right now, or is it inside another folder called folder? So we'll go inside that and then open up this apple.jpg. Equivalent to image source. So someone just asked the question, is this equivalent to image source equals something and then like a closing caret and then another closing tag called image? I think the syntax for images are just a little bit different. You wouldn't use the same kind of syntax that you would for example, a paragraph tag or a header tag. You would just follow this right here. It's just one single tag. Alternatively, you could use an image somewhere else on the internet. So if we had this image right here, and you can try it out later on when you're going over these slides, if you just try to open this link, it'll just bring you to a single image. It's not going to be a full web page. So we can also use something like this as our source. Okay, I'll stop here really quickly. Does anyone have any questions about any of that? Okay, cool. So a quick check for comprehension and to see if you really understand what goes on in like nesting tags. Can someone either unmute or type in chat, what do you think the result here is going to be? We have an image tag in here and we have this href tag outside. So if we have this in our HTML code and this shows up on our website, what is this going to do? Yeah, perfect. A lot of you got that exactly right. So we have this image, and then what this will do is, because this image is nested inside this href, as I mentioned earlier, what's in between these two tags is what we need to click to get to a certain link. And the link that we go to is just this link right here. So we have this logo.png. If we click this, it'll bring us to the wdd.io website. So all of the tags that we talked about are very specific. It's like either a paragraph tag or a header tag or an image tag. But what if our web pages get more and more complicated? We have a lot of things and we kind of want to clump things together, or just to help us organize, or later on when we start doing CSS, to kind of get some more functionality, get some more structure, and like formatting in there. So what tags can we spot here that we haven't seen yet? Does anyone want to just take a shot at it in chat? H1. So H1 we saw earlier, right? H1 is a header. Yeah, we see this div tag. So yeah, perfect. So we see this div tag. The div tag is this generic tag that does nothing else but help you organize your code. And we'll get to this when we start learning CSS, but let's say we have our web page that looks like this. It's a department store website. I guess there's no styling here yet, but we have this title of fruit, and then underneath we have the subtitle or this description that says we have apples, oranges, pears, etc. We have another section called coffee, and there's some description for coffee. So it kind of makes sense that fruits and description will go together, and coffee and like the different types of coffee you have will go together. And that's exactly what we're doing right here with this div tag. We take H2 and P and we put it inside this div tag right here, or these two div tags right here. And we take this coffee and this P and we put that inside these two div tags as well. So again, a div tag is simply an empty, meaningless box. Really, if we remove these div tags, our website is going to look exactly the same. It's not going to change anything yet, but it divides up our page content for better structure. It helps us group things together. For example, let's say we wanted to add a border around this. It makes sense that these two are grouped together. We want to add a border around these two elements and a border around these two elements. Now our div tag can help us do that because we already have things organized into nice sections. So as a summary, HTML is used for structuring content. Some tags like M or H1 come with some visual formatting already, but these are going to be like defaults, for example, Times New Roman that come with the browser. And then next week, we'll introduce CSS to change the appearance, to specify what kind of font we have, or like we want to use on our website, what size font, what font color, and all of that. And also really important is that HTML is not used for visual formatting. It's just for putting your text and images on your page and into meaningful chunks. That's why div is so important, because it'll help us create these more complicated layouts later on. Okay, I think I'm going a little long here, so I'll try to speed this up a little bit. But the most common issue on the first homework, and a lot of homeworks and a lot of projects, is adding images. A lot of people ask on Piazza, well, what is going on? My image is not showing up. I think I linked it correctly, but it's just not showing up on my website. So the issue is, for images and links, you need to specify where the image is or where you want to link to, just as we saw earlier. So let's say on your laptop, you have this absolute path, very long, and it includes like the user on your particular laptop. This will work fine on your computer, but when you try to upload it, that image will no longer show up. So the reason why is our web server doesn't really know where to find this picture, because there's no like user / Heidi, which was a previous instructor, / pictures in our web server. All we have access to is what you like submitted to us through your project file, like zip file. So instead, we can put the image that we want in the same folder as our HTML file in a structure that sort of looks like this. So we have our homework one that we put in, that will like add everything related to homework one into. Inside we have index.html, which represents the home page as we mentioned. And then we have a folder called images that contains all of the images that we might want to use on our website. So now if we're inside our index.html document, telling our code or telling the browser where to find images, we can give very clear instructions. For example, we're inside index.html. Now we want to go look at our neighbor, which is this images folder. We'll go inside this folder and then we'll select dog.jpg. So now we have images/dog.jpg, and then that will show up fine on your web page, because no matter where this homework 1 folder is, these images are always going to be in the same place relative to this index.html where we're referencing this image. Also, our web server is case sensitive, so just be careful about that. Dog.jpg versus dog.jpg in all caps. Those are going to be very different for us. Let's see. I think I'll skip this. So when we're dealing with paths, we have relative paths and absolute paths. So absolute paths, as we saw earlier, is like this file : / users / whatever the username is / pictures / otter.jpg. These are not very friendly because, again, if you submit only the homework 1 folder to us, we don't have access to this entire file path. We don't have access to like your entire computer. However, if you have relative paths that look like this, that'll be a lot easier for you to reference where an image is relative to another document. So important here is for relative paths, if we want to go inside assets and images and otter.jpg, that's what we saw earlier. We can also do the same thing with / and then assets, images, otter.jpg. That just stays in the same directory. So that's the same thing as like not including it at all. Whereas / is going to be going up to the parent directory and then looking for a folder called assets and then a folder called images and then otter.jpg. That might sound a little bit confusing, but a quick example is, right, here. So here in our image source, we have / assets / images / otter.jpg. And then right now, the file that we're editing, this file right here, this HTML code right here, comes from otter1.html. So we want to get this otter.jpg image from this file right here. How can we go about doing that? We'll start from this otter1.html. We'll go // which will bring us to the parent, which will bring us over here to this otters file. And then now we can go to assets folder, which is a siblings of this otter folder. So we'll go inside assets. We'll look for an images folder. That's the next step right here. We'll go inside this image folder. And then inside this image folder, finally, we'll look for otter.jpg. And we'll see it's sitting very nicely right in here. Okay, I'm running a little over time. So last thing I'll say is your first homework is going to be released on Piazza right after lecture, and it's going to be due next Tuesday at 7 p.m. This will cover a lot of the basic syntax of HTML that you just saw in this lecture, and it'll guide you through making your first website. Yeah, so you can find it on the WDD portal along with the slides, and feel free to ask any questions on Piazza or show up to our office hours. Okay, and I think now I'll pass it on to Lily.
You want me to share my screen?
Yeah, that'd probably be better.
Okay. Cool. Welcome
Oh, Lily,
to...
you want to give them like a 3-minute break?
Oh, yeah, sure. We can do a break. Design should be pretty fast. So I guess we can start again at 7:53. I'll share my screen and we can get started with the design lecture. Yeah, so welcome to the design portion. This week we'll cover an introduction to design. So first off, what is design? Contrary to popular belief, design is not purely aesthetics. So it's not art. It's not just about making things pretty. There is much more to design. Ultimately, it's about problem solving. So coming up with a solution that, while it may look good, has to solve the problem that we're designing for. And so here we have, I guess, like a kind of hierarchy of what the design process kind of looks like. So at the very top, there's the visual design, and that's what you would see. So I think it's like often what people perceive design as. So the things that look pretty on our screens, and all the like aesthetics. And then underneath there's the skeleton, and that's typically what we consider UI design. So it's the user interface, and then there's the structure underneath that, which is the UX design, which is the user experience. And then we have scope, which has, I guess, some of the requirements that we want for our project. And that can be like content requirements or feature requirements. And then there's strategy at the very bottom. So like the reason why we're designing, and that includes our business objectives and then also user needs. So these are some, I guess, commonly seen design terms floating around. They're all like related to each other. I think sometimes people will like use them interchangeably. But for this class, we're mostly going to focus on these three: user interface design, user experience design, and human-centered design. So what is user interface design? UI is the space where interactions between humans and machines occur. So it's what you see on your screen, I think, in a sense. And UI doesn't necessarily have to be digital. So it doesn't have to be like a website. It can be physical also. And then there's user experience. And user experience is designing for like a person's, or not designing for it, but it's like how the user feels about the design. So their emotions or attitudes about using a product, system, or service. So it's like, how do they feel as they navigate through things? Is it easy to use? Is this experience like intuitive? And then we have human-centered design. So human-centered design is an approach that incorporates the human perspective. So what works best for humans based on like our intuition. So like what we naturally like gravitate towards, or like how we read the colors that stand out to us. And then also like our habits. And then I guess like we'll cover more human-centered design later in other design lectures. So basically design is form meets function. It's not just visual. There's much more that goes into it, including the interactions with the visual side. And there's really a lot of like research and processes that go into making something that has good design. So I guess like sometimes a lot of us might just feel like, oh, we're not very good at design. I just can't see it. Like how do I make things look good the way like other people do, right? Because it just feels like, oh, they're just like naturally good at it. So throughout this semester, we'll like kind of take you through some of the design processes and like teach you how to, I guess, get better at design, so you can feel more confident about design. So we have an explanation about fidelity. So here we have some pictures of what a low or mid fidelity website would look like. And that just means like, I guess the basic like structure for your website in terms of design. So I guess, for example, we can say like comparing it to an essay. For an essay, you might first start with an outline, and then this would be the outline for our website. Rather than including images or like actual text, you can just like block them off with boxes or like random words, just to like have a placeholder that you can use to like lay out your items. And then these are also called wireframes. And then we have high fidelity. So we're kind of jumping from like the outline all the way to like your second to last draft or something. So high fidelity is, as you can see, like much nicer. The image in the like left center-ish area, that's what a low fidelity, a low to mid fidelity mockup might look like. And then the one on the right is high fidelity. And as you can see, the one on the right has much more personality. There's different colors, different fonts, all the text is correct. And it's really been like designed and polished to look nice. And hopefully like you'll be able to translate that directly onto a website. And then there's also interactive prototypes. So websites aren't static, like they're not just a painting on a wall, right? You can interact with them. You can scroll, there's buttons, different things happen when you hover, there can be pop-ups. So the final step sometimes in web design is creating these interactive prototypes where you link together the different items on your page to simulate like what the actual website would look like. And that can include like linking your buttons to different pages. So like if you have an about page, pressing about would actually bring you to that page. And like basically just showing how your user would be able to interact with that website. So putting it all together, basically we'll just go through going from a wireframe to having a mockup and going all the way to HTML. And that won't all happen today, but we're gonna go through it like over the course of this semester. And then so here, as you can see on the left, there's like a wireframe. On the right, there's a card, possibly from Airbnb. And then underneath there's HTML, which you just learned about. So here we can see that this card, the green rectangle around it is like our outer div container, which Jay just mentioned. It holds all of our content and it makes it really easy to like organize everything. And then within that outer div, we have an inner div that holds our image. So this div is like, in our wireframe, it's just an empty box because we're just like blocking items out. But on the actual website, you can see that they'll have like different images for different cards. And that's just placed inside this like rectangular div. And then underneath, we have items like the price and the title. And that's just, again, blocked out. It's like a very, very low fidelity wireframe here, where it's just like a rectangle saying that this is like the space we want it to take up. We don't really know like what the text is gonna be yet, but this is where it's gonna go. And then in our HTML, again, we just put that in another div, but inside of that div, we might have like an H1 tag or something. And then translated to a website, that would be the price text and then the like description. And then finally, there's the last section at the bottom. And that's just the stars. We can place that in another div. And then we would just have like images maybe. So just like we have tools for coding, you know, like writing the actual HTML for our websites and looking at them, so the web browsers and the code editors, we have creative tools for prototyping too, making these mockups for what our websites will actually look like. And some of the ones that we have here include Figma, Adobe XD, Sketch, and Illustrator. But for this class, we're mostly just going to focus on Figma. So some encouragement. I guess like everyone feels that sometimes like they don't really know what they're doing with design. Even the best designers get blocked sometimes. So like, don't worry. We're gonna give you the resources. And this year we're also like starting these design challenges to help you really feel confident about your design skills. We'll teach you how to like talk about design, think about it, like critique it so that you know what looks good. And then we'll also give you tools such as Figma that that will help you, I guess, realize your designs. So don't be worried if you like feel like you're not good right now. I think everyone started from a place where they felt that everyone else was better than them. So yeah. And if you're interested in design, feel free to talk to any of us. I know there are TAs who really enjoy design. Yeah, so don't be afraid to reach out. You can come to our office hours or send something on Piazza or email us. So again, today we covered the fundamentals of design. Next week, we'll start going through user interfaces. And then at the end of the semester, we'll like do some more exploratory design work, but it's like just more open and up to your like creativity. Are there any questions?
I have a really quick question about Figma. So, is this like something that you can like use to like make like interactive like design prototypes? And how much will we be learning about Figma? Because I mean, is it a common tool to use? Yeah.
Yeah, Figma is a very common tool. It's available like completely for free online. I think you can also download an application for it. But I think one of the nice things about Figma is that like in addition to being able to like lay out your different elements, there's like a prototype section where you can connect different things. So like I said, like the buttons that actually bring you to a different page, that's like available to do in Figma. Was there another part of your question?
Is it used a lot? And will we be getting like are we going to be taught how to use Figma?
Yeah, it's used a lot. I think like in industry, some people might use like Sketch more, but Figma is definitely becoming way more popular. I think it's much more accessible to like early users, people like just starting off. And yes, we'll definitely do like Figma. We'll have labs that are centered around Figma. It'll also be included in your homework and then possibly also the design challenges this semester.
Thank you so much.
Are there any other questions? Oh, homework is released today. What about labs? Yeah, homework will be released tonight, and then labs should also come out because again, labs are due Friday at 11:59. So, like, feel free to get started. But if you're gonna come to lab on Thursday, which we highly, highly encourage, you should be able to like work on lab then too. Are there any other questions? Cool. I think that might be it for the slides. Yeah. I guess if you have anything you need to talk to us about, feel free to stay after. Otherwise, you're free to go.
Thanks for coming, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Hello, I have a quick question.